The Alpha King stated, "That dress stays here and so do you." When his wife, the castle of the Alpha King stood like a dark sentinel on the edge of the forest, its towers piercing the sky like sharp black teeth. Fog rolled over the forest floor, curling around the stone walls as if the trees themselves were whispering warnings. Inside, candles flickered in their golden sconces, casting shadows that danced like restless spirits. Tonight, the castle would see a visitor long thought lost, a woman whose return could stir both desire and danger. Lady Selene rode through the mist, the hooves of her black horse striking the cobblestones in measured rhythm. She had not been to this castle in nearly a decade, and every step toward its gates made her heart pound, not with fear, but with a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. Her journey had been long, and the lands she crossed had tested her resolve, but now, at last, she had returned. She wore a dress that was impossible to ignore. Its color was a deep crimson, almost like blood in the candlelight, flowing like liquid fire over her form. The fabric shimmered with a faint magic, a remnant of the enchanted silks of her homeland. Every fold of the dress spoke of elegance, defiance, and memory, the memory of a time when she and the Alpha King had once shared a bond that neither time nor betrayal had fully erased. At the castle gates the guards paused, eyes widening at her appearance. No one had returned like this. Whispers spread quickly, carried on the wind. "The lady of the crimson dress, she is here." Inside, King Kale sat in the throne room, a figure carved of stone and shadow. His eyes, sharp as obsidian, had been scanning reports from the outer lands, but something made him look up. The moment he saw her, his breath caught. The red dress, the way it flowed like fire, the aura of calm defiance she carried, it all stirred memories he had tried to bury. Memories of a young woman who had vanished from his life under circumstances he had never forgiven. Selene dismounted gracefully, her boots silent against the polished stone floor. She lifted her chin and walked forward, the hem of her dress brushing lightly against the floor, leaving a trail that seemed to ignite the air with quiet power. Kale's gaze followed her with intensity, every movement sending a spark of anger, longing, and something unspoken into his chest. "You are back," he said, his voice low, a growl that could have been mistaken for the wind rattling the windows. Selene paused. Her eyes met his, steady and unflinching. "I told you I would return," she replied softly. "The world has changed and I have changed too, but some things cannot be left behind." Kale's jaw tightened. He rose, his presence commanding the room like a shadow stretching across the walls. He stepped closer, his boots clicking against the marble floor. "That dress," he said, his voice now sharp, "stays here, and so do you." Selene froze, a shiver of surprise and something deeper running through her. She had expected anger, perhaps even cold dismissal, but not this, possessive command that made her chest ache in ways she could not name. She wanted to speak, to argue, to step back, but the weight of his gaze rooted her to the spot. "You cannot just order me," she said, her voice trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the old, familiar thrill of standing before him. "I am the Alpha King," Kale said simply. His eyes burned into hers like molten stone. "Orders are my way, and you have no choice in this room tonight." A heavy silence fell. Outside, the wind howled through the castle towers, carrying the scent of pine and storm. The flickering candles cast long shadows across Kale's face, highlighting the sharpness of his jaw, the stern line of his lips, and the dark depth of his eyes. He was a man both frightening and magnetic, a king whose heart had been hardened by betrayal and loss, yet now, in the presence of Selene, began to betray a vulnerability he had never shown to anyone. Selene's mind raced. Years of absence, of survival and secrets, had led her to this moment. She had prepared herself for danger, for hostility, perhaps even for exile, but not for the tide of emotion that rose in Kale's presence. There was anger, yes, but also something that hinted at desire, something that whispered that the bond they had shared so long ago had never fully broken. "I am here," she said finally, her voice firmer now. "Whether you want me or not, I am here." Cale studied her, the storm of feelings in his heart hidden behind a mask of control. He wanted to reach out, to touch her, to pull her into his arms, but years of pride and past grievances held him back. He could not yet admit that part of him had never stopped longing for her. Instead, he said, "You will stay in this wing of the castle. You will not leave without my permission. And tonight, you will not walk out of my sight." Seleni's lips parted in quiet shock, but she did not argue. She knew the fire in his command was not mere cruelty. It was a test, a boundary that mirrored the invisible chains that had kept them apart for so many years. She bowed her head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement, though inside she burned with defiance and hope. The servants, who had watched silently from the corners, whispered among themselves. The castle rarely saw such drama, and the tension that now filled the room was almost tangible. Even the walls seemed to lean in, listening, waiting for what might come next. As Selene was escorted to her chambers, the castle itself seemed alive with anticipation. Torches flickered along the corridors, shadows twisting like restless spirits. She passed paintings of past kings and queens, their eyes seeming to follow her as if they, too, knew that the return of this woman in the crimson dress was more than a personal affair. It could shape the destiny of the kingdom. Once inside her chambers, Selene let out a slow breath. The room was richly adorned, tapestries depicting battles, hunts, and the royal lineage. Her reflection in the tall mirror showed a woman who had faced storms, crossed mountains, and survived the darkness. Yet in her eyes lingered the same question that had haunted her for years. Could she face the Alpha King and emerge unbroken, or would the past crush them both under its weight? Meanwhile, in his private study, Cale stood before the window, gazing out at the moonlit forest. The wind rustled the trees, carrying with it a sense of foreboding. The raven, black as midnight, perched atop the highest tower, let out a cry that echoed across the courtyard. Cale's heart skipped, and he frowned. The bird was a bad omen, a sign that old curses and new dangers were awakening. His thoughts drifted to Selene. That dress, that woman, she had returned not just to him, but to the kingdom, and with her came secrets and power he could not yet fathom. He knew he could not afford to trust her, not fully. And yet, his desire, his need to protect her, overrode reason. Later that night, the castle lay quiet under the moon, its towers piercing the fog. Selene sat by her window, the crimson dress pooling around her like molten fire. She traced the embroidery with her fingers, remembering nights of laughter, whispered promises, and the bitter taste of betrayal that had separated her from Cale. She wondered if time had softened him, or hardened him beyond repair. Just as her thoughts began to drift, a shadow moved across the corridor outside. The faint sound of boots on stone made her heart beat faster. She turned, expecting a guard, but found the door slightly ajar. A chill ran down her spine. Someone, or something, was watching. From the darkness, a soft voice called her name. "Selene," her breath caught. The voice was deep, familiar, impossible to ignore. She stepped back, clutching the folds of her dress. "Cale," she whispered. The door creaked open further, and there he stood, tall, imposing, yet closer than ever before. The firelight from the hall danced across his features, highlighting both the hardness and the vulnerability in his eyes. "I could not leave you alone tonight," he said, his voice low, steady, and commanding. "The dress, it stays here, and you stay with me." Selene's chest tightened, caught between defiance, longing, and the strange pull that had always drawn her to him. She wanted to argue, to flee, to reclaim the freedom she had fought so hard to protect, but the intensity in his gaze held her still. The Alpha King was not just a ruler of lands and armies. He was a king who ruled over her heart, whether she wished it or not. Outside, the raven cried again, its shriek cutting through the night. It was as if the world itself warned them that their reunion was more than personal. It was entwined with fate, prophecy, and dangers that neither of them could yet see. Selene swallowed hard. The past, the present, and the future collided in her chest. One thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same again. And in the shadowed corridors of the castle, unseen eyes watched, waiting, whispering promises of darkness yet to come. Cliffhanger, the door clicked shut behind Kale, sealing them together. Selene pressed a hand to her heart, knowing the night would be long, and that the crimson dress was only the beginning of the storm about to descend. Outside, the raven's cry repeated, sharper this time, a prelude to a curse awakening in the forest beyond. The castle had fallen into an uneasy quiet after Kale had closed the door behind him. Selene sat on the edge of the canopy bed, crimson dress pooled around her like molten fire. Her fingers traced the embroidery nervously, but her mind was far from idle. Thoughts of the Alpha King, the man who had once held her heart and now held her fate, swirled like a storm inside her. She remembered the years of exile, the secrets she had uncovered in distant lands, and the pain of being torn away from Kale. And now, after so long, she was back in the castle, under his watchful gaze, a visitor who was no longer free. Yet the room felt strangely alive, charged with an energy that she had not felt in years. Meanwhile, Kale retreated to his private study. His mind was a battlefield of pride and longing. He paced the room, fingers brushing the edges of maps and ancient tomes. The castle's walls seemed to whisper, echoing memories he had tried to bury. He could not understand how a single dress, a single woman could have such power over him, yet there she was, radiant and defiant, and the very sight of her made the world tilt. A knock at the study door pulled him from his thoughts. "Your Majesty," said a soft voice. It was Leora, the king's trusted advisor and keeper of the royal archives. "A message has arrived from the northern forests. The trees whisper of disturbances, dark forces awakening. Some say the old curse is stirring." Kale's jaw tightened. The curse had been dormant for centuries, a shadow of betrayal and magic set upon his ancestors. Now, with Selene back in the castle, the omen felt more personal, more urgent. "I see," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "Prepare the wards and alert the guardians. No harm may come to this castle, or to her." Selene, unaware of the growing danger, wandered the halls. She explored quietly, letting her fingers brush the tapestries that told the story of Kale's ancestors. Images of battles and rulers long gone stared at her as if judging her presence. She paused at a painting of a young king, Kale in his youth, standing beside a woman with familiar eyes. A chill ran down her spine. The past, it seemed, was not ready to release them. Later that evening, Kale summoned Selene to the library. The chamber was enormous, filled with tomes bound in dark leather, their spines etched with symbols of magic and history. The light of a single chandelier reflected off the polished floor, and shadows clung to the corners like silent watchers. Selene entered, holding herself steady despite the tightness in her chest. Kale's figure was a silhouette against the window, framed by the silver light of the moon. He did not speak at first, simply studied her with those dark, intense eyes that could see everything yet reveal nothing. "Sit," he commanded softly. Selene obeyed. She perched on a chair carved from black oak, her hands resting in her lap. The silence stretched, filled with unspoken questions and memories neither dared voice. "The curse," Kale began finally, his voice deliberate, "is old, older than this castle. It is tied to betrayal, and it strikes at the hearts of those who break trust. Your presence here, I fear it has awakened it." Selene's breath caught. "My presence? I am here to make amends, to help if I can. I did not intend." Kale held up a hand, silencing her. "I know your intentions are not false," he said, "but the past is never truly gone. Your family, your disappearance, it is all connected. And now you are here. I cannot let you leave, and yet I must protect you." Selene felt the weight of his words. For the first time, she understood that Kale's cold exterior hid more than anger. It hid fear, vulnerability, and a deep love he dared not voice. She wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap that time had carved between them, but the fear of rejection and the ghosts of the past held her back. "I do not wish to be a danger," she whispered, "but I am here because I care for you and for this kingdom. You must believe me." Kale's gaze softened slightly, though the tension in his shoulders did not ease. "Belief is not enough," he said. Trust is what is needed, and trust is the hardest thing for me to give." They sat together in silence, the weight of unspoken emotions filling the library. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves of the ancient forest, carrying with it the first whispers of the curse. It was subtle at first, a tremor in the earth, a shadow flitting across the walls, but it was enough to make Kale's chest tighten with unease. Over the next days, Selene began to explore the castle under Kale's watch. She walked the corridors, examined hidden alcoves, and even ventured into the gardens, where moonlight shimmered on frost-covered leaves. Kale followed, not openly, but always close enough that she could feel his presence. Each glance, each brush of the sleeve as they passed, sent shivers down her spine. The tension between them was a constant, quiet fire. One evening in the moonlit gardens, Selene found a hidden fountain, its waters dark and still. She knelt beside it, her reflection rippling in the black water. Suddenly, Kale stepped into the light, his shadow stretching across the marble tiles. "You should not wander here alone," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I am not afraid," Selene replied, her chin lifted. "I have faced much in the world, Kale. I can face shadows in a garden." Kale stepped closer, the distance between them shrinking. His eyes studied her, searching for hidden truths. "It is not the shadows you should fear," he said softly, "but what they hide, and sometimes the heart hides more than shadows." Selene's fingers brushed the water, sending ripples across her reflection. "And what does your heart hide?" she asked quietly. Kale did not answer immediately. Instead, he knelt beside her, close enough that the warmth of his presence wrapped around her like a cloak. "I hide regret, longing, and fear," he admitted, the words almost lost to the night wind. "Regret that I pushed you away, longing that I never stopped feeling, fear that I cannot protect you from what is coming." Selene felt tears prick her eyes. She had longed to hear these words, yet she had feared them as well. "Kale, her voice faltered. She wanted to confess everything, to speak the truth of her feelings, but the weight of the curse and the dangers they did not yet understand held her back. Before words could follow, a sudden chill swept the garden. The air grew heavy, and the water in the fountain began to ripple violently, as if something unseen had passed beneath its surface. The leaves of the trees rustled, though no wind blew. Kale's eyes narrowed. "The curse," he muttered, standing instantly. "It is awake." Selene stood beside him, her heart racing. "What do we do?" she asked, Kale's jaw set. "We prepare. We do not know its full strength yet, but I will not let it harm you, I swear it." They returned to the castle, moving quickly through the halls. Shadows seemed to cling to their heels, and every creak of the stone floors made Selene flinch. The servants whispered nervously, sensing the unease that even Kale could not mask. In the library, Kale consulted the ancient tomes. He traced the lineage of the curse, noting every connection to betrayal, magic, and royal blood. Selene watched, her mind racing with the realization that her return had brought not only reunion but danger. "It is tied to trust," Kale explained. "It strikes hardest when hearts are divided. It is a test, and one we must pass together." Selene stepped closer. "Then we face it together," she said, determination shining in her eyes. "I will not run, not from you and not from this." Kale looked at her, the fire of the moonlight catching his dark eyes. For the first time, he saw not just the woman who had once left him, but the woman who had returned stronger, wiser, and unafraid. A spark of hope ignited within him, fragile but real. Yet outside, the raven's cry echoed again, sharper this time. A shadow flitted across the battlements, unseen but present, waiting. The curse had begun its work, and the night was far from over. Selene and Kale stood together, united in intent, yet the air between them thrummed with tension. Their past was heavy, their trust fragile, and the darkness outside whispered promises of trials yet to come. Cliffhanger, in the northern tower, a hidden chamber door creaked open on its own. Inside, a dark symbol glowed faintly on the stone floor, a mark of the curse. And as Selene and Kale prepared to face the unknown, a whisper echoed through the castle. The queen who defies the Alpha will awaken the shadow. The castle shimmered in candlelight, its stone walls alive with the murmurs of servants and nobles preparing for the grand masked ball. Tonight was meant to be a celebration, a distraction from the whispers of the curse that had begun to stir in the northern forests. Yet beneath the surface, the air was thick with tension, magic, and longing. Selene stood before the mirror in her chambers, adjusting the silken folds of her dress. The deep crimson fabric hugged her form elegantly, flowing down to the floor like liquid fire. A delicate silver mask, adorned with intricate filigree, covered her eyes, giving her an air of mystery. She looked every bit a queen of shadow and flame, yet her heart raced with unease. The ball was not merely a spectacle. Kale had insisted that she attend, knowing that the gatherings of nobles were often where truths were revealed and secrets were uncovered. And he would be there, masked, a king whose presence alone could command every heartbeat in the room. As Selene descended the grand staircase, the guests paused in quiet admiration. The music swelled, a haunting melody played by the orchestra, echoing through the vast hall like a river of light and shadow. She felt eyes on her, whispers brushing against her ears, but none compared to the gaze she already felt waiting for her. Kale emerged from the shadows, mask in place, black cloak flowing around him. Every step he took commanded attention, yet his eyes, though hidden, seemed to pierce through the mask, seeking her amidst the crowd. Selene met his gaze, and for a moment the world fell away. The noise of the ball faded, replaced by the unspoken words between them, longing, tension, regret, and desire. He extended a gloved hand, and she took it, her fingers brushing his in a spark that made her pulse quicken. "Dance with me," he said, his voice low, almost a growl that only she could hear. Selene nodded, allowing him to lead her into the center of the hall. The music wrapped around them, a rhythm that mirrored the quiet storm of their emotions. Each step, each turn, was a dance of dominance and surrender, of control and vulnerability. Kale's grip was firm yet protective, and Selene matched him with grace and subtle defiance. As they moved, memories of their past flickered in her mind, secret meetings in hidden gardens, stolen moments of laughter, and the heartbreak of their separation. Kale, too, felt the weight of those years pressing down, the bitterness of lost time mingling with the undeniable pull he had never been able to resist. "You look extraordinary," Kale murmured, his tone almost tender, though edged with the control he could not release. Selene's lips curved in a small, fleeting smile. "I could say the same about you," she replied softly, her voice carrying a strength he had once adored. "But do not let your words distract us from what is coming." Kale's eyes darkened. "The curse," he said quietly. "It is near. I can feel its presence." A shiver ran down Selene's spine. The ballroom, once a place of celebration, seemed to grow darker, the shadows twisting along the walls as if alive. The music continued, haunting and beautiful, yet beneath it lay an undercurrent of danger. From the edge of the hall, a figure cloaked in black watched them. The mask concealed its features, but the intent was clear. This was no ordinary guest. The curse had sent its emissary. Selene sensed it first, a prickling at the back of her neck. "Kale, someone is here," she whispered. Kale's hand tightened slightly around hers, though the dance never faltered. "Stay close," he said, His voice was steady, yet his eyes scanned the crowd, calculating, ready to strike. The figure moved closer, weaving through the dancers like a shadow. Every instinct in Kale screamed danger, yet he did not break the rhythm of their dance. Selene, feeling the tension coiled like a spring around them, realized that the curse's reach was far greater than either of them had anticipated. Suddenly, the emissary struck, not with weapons but with magic. A black tendril of energy shot across the hall, aimed at Kale. Selene reacted instinctively, stepping forward and raising her hand. A faint shimmer of light burst from her fingertips, deflecting the attack. The crowd gasped, though most saw only a flicker of candlelight. Kale's eyes widened slightly. "You have power," he said under his breath, admiration mingling with surprise. Selene swallowed. "I have learned much in my absence, but it is not enough. We must end this before it grows stronger." The dance ended abruptly, and Kale led her behind the raised dais where the orchestra had played. The black-cloaked figure retreated into the shadows, vanishing as mysteriously as it had appeared. The music faltered, and murmurs ran through the hall. Guests noticed the sudden chill in the air, the flicker of shadows that seemed to move on their own. Kale's gaze remained on Selene. "You saved me," he said quietly, his voice filled with an emotion he struggled to control. "And yet I fear what is coming. The curse, it is tied to our past, and it grows stronger every day." Selene met his eyes, determination and longing warring in her expression. "Then we face it together. There is no other way." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Together," he agreed, though his words carried the weight of a promise and a warning. The next morning the castle was alive with preparation. Kale summoned the guardians, the mages, and the scholars who knew of ancient magic. Selene joined him in the strategy room, her mind alert, her resolve firm. Together they pored over maps, prophecies, and old texts. "You must understand," Kale said, tracing the path of the curse with a gloved finger. "Its strength is amplified by fear and mistrust. It feeds on what we hide from each other. That is why your presence, your honesty, is crucial. If we falter, the kingdom falls." Selene nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. "Then we will not falter. I will not let it win." As they spoke, Kale's expression softened. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to see Selene not as a challenge to his pride, but as an equal, someone he could trust with both his secrets and his heart. Yet the bond between them was still fragile, tested by years of separation, past betrayals, and the shadow of the curse. That night, Kale insisted that Selene accompany him to the castle balcony. The moonlight spilled over the battlements, illuminating the forest beyond. The raven, black as night, perched on a branch of the highest tree, its eyes glowing faintly. "The curse waits," Kale said, his tone almost tender as he held her hand. "It is patient, but it will strike soon, and when it does, we must be ready." Selene looked out at the forest, feeling the ancient magic that lay beneath the soil, the trees, and the mist. "I will be ready," she said softly. "For you, for us, for the kingdom." Kale turned to her, his gaze piercing through the mask of control he had worn for years. "Selene, I—" His words were interrupted by a scream from the ballroom below. They raced down the staircase, the sound echoing through the halls. Guests ran in panic, their masks askew, eyes wide with terror. In the center of the hall, a black mist swirled, dark tendrils rising from the floor as if the shadows themselves had taken form. Kale stepped forward, placing himself between the mist and the terrified nobles. "Stay back," he commanded, his voice resonating through the hall. The mist recoiled slightly at his presence, but it was not enough to hold it back entirely. Selene moved beside him, her hands glowing faintly with protective energy. Together they channeled their combined power, the force of their trust and determination forming a shield against the dark tendrils. The mist hissed and writhed, the curse testing their resolve. Kale's heart pounded, not just from the battle, but from the closeness of Selene. Her presence, her courage, ignited something inside him that he had long denied, a mixture of admiration, longing, and an unspoken promise of love. With a final surge of effort, they pushed the mist back, forcing it into the shadows where it disappeared for now. The hall was silent except for the ragged breathing of the nobles and the crackling of the candle flames. Kale turned to Selene, his hand brushing hers. "We did it for now," he said, "but this is only the beginning." Selene nodded, her eyes meeting his. "Then we face the beginning together. Whatever comes, I will not leave your side." Outside, the raven's cry echoed again, sharp and foreboding. From the distant mountains, a new shadow moved, watching, waiting. The curse had been challenged, but it had not been defeated. Cliffhanger. As Kale and Selene stood together in the hall, the chandeliers flickered violently. A deep, otherworldly voice whispered through the castle, "The queen who defies the Alpha will awaken the shadow fully." And in the shadows, unseen, the black-cloaked emissary returned, stronger, closer, and more determined than ever. The night had grown darker than ever, and the castle seemed alive with whispers. Shadows stretched along the walls like living creatures, twisting and writhing as if the darkness itself had a heartbeat. Outside, the wind howled through the towers, carrying the scent of pine, rain, and something more sinister. The curse, long dormant, had now awakened fully, testing the hearts of the Alpha King and the Queen who had defied him. Selene stood in the heart chamber, the crimson dress flowing around her like liquid fire. Kale was beside her, tall, broad, and unwavering, his hand brushing lightly against hers. Together, they faced the black tendrils of magic that had poured into the chamber from the northern forest. The walls were etched with ancient symbols, glowing faintly with protective runes, yet the shadows clawed at their edges, seeking to break in. "We have no choice," Kale said, his voice low but firm. "We face it together." Selene nodded, her heart steady despite the storm of fear around them. "Together," she repeated. Her hands began to glow faintly, a soft light that pushed back against the darkness. She felt the energy of the castle respond, the wards and protective charms awakening under her touch. She could feel the bond between her and Kale strengthening, a current of trust and love flowing through them. The black-cloaked emissary appeared once more, stepping from the shadows with silent menace. Its mask reflected no light, its presence chilling the room. It raised its hands, and the shadows surged, twisting into tendrils aimed directly at Selene and Kale. Kale moved instinctively, placing himself in front of her. "Now, Selene," he shouted. Selene lifted her hands, focusing all her energy into a shield of light. It radiated outward, striking the tendrils and forcing them back. The emissary hissed, a sound like wind over jagged rocks, and stepped closer. "You are stronger than I expected," the voice said, hollow and echoing. "But your strength alone will not save you." Kale's jaw tightened. "We are not alone," he said, looking into Selene's eyes. "We have each other." The emissary faltered just slightly, as if the truth of his words had reached something buried deep within the magic. Selene felt it too, the curse feeding not on their weakness, but on their doubts. She tightened her focus, letting the bond of trust and love between them flow into her hands. "Together," she whispered. Kale echoed the word, and the light between them flared, pushing the shadows back violently. The emissary screamed, a sound that made the walls tremble, and vanished into a cloud of black smoke. For a moment, the chamber was still. The air shimmered with residual magic, and the faint glow of protective runes pulsed along the walls. Kale lowered his hands, breathing heavily, and Selene turned to him. "We did it," she said softly, though she knew the battle had only been one step in a greater struggle. Kale's eyes met hers, dark and stormy, yet now tempered with warmth. "No," he said quietly. "We did more than that. You saved us, not just the castle, but me. You saved me from the darkness inside myself." Selene's chest tightened. She had long carried her own fears, the guilt of leaving, the worry of not being enough. Hearing Kale speak so openly, so vulnerably, made the years of pain feel lighter. She reached out, brushing her hand against his. "And you saved me, Kale. You reminded me that even in the darkest night, trust and love can shine brighter than any curse." Kale's lips curved into a rare, genuine smile. "Then let us end this," he said, "once and for all." Together, they ascended to the highest tower, the northern tower where the curse had originated centuries ago. The room was filled with ancient runes carved into stone, glowing faintly with residual magic. In the center, a black crystal pulsed with dark energy, the heart of the curse. Shadows spiraled around it like living smoke, hungry for fear and doubt. Kale and Selene approached cautiously. The closer they got, the more the crystal throbbed, sensing their courage, their bond, and the challenge they posed. "Selene," Kale said, his hand brushing hers again, "we must combine our strength. Trust me completely." "There is no other way," Selene nodded. "I trust you, always." Kale lifted his hands, drawing on his own power, the strength of the Alpha King, the protector of the land, the man whose heart had once hardened with loss. Selene followed, weaving her light with his strength, creating a radiant current that wrapped around the black crystal. The shadows recoiled, shrieking, clawing at the edges of the light. The crystal cracked slightly, tiny fissures appearing as the bond between Kale and Selene amplified their power. Energy surged through the tower, echoing like a storm, shaking the very stones beneath their feet. "You can do it, Selene," Kale shouted. "Focus on us, on the trust between us." Selene took a deep breath, her mind clearing of doubt. She thought of the years apart, the pain, the longing, and the moments they had shared since her return. She let that energy flow, letting her love for Kale and their shared trust become the beacon that would shatter the darkness. The crystal cracked again, larger this time, light spilling from the fissures. The shadows screeched, twisting and flailing, unable to withstand the brilliance of their combined power. With a final surge, Selene and Kale directed the light into the crystal, and it shattered, sending a shockwave of energy throughout the tower. The black smoke dissolved, the shadows vanished, and silence fell. The curse, ancient and relentless, had been broken. Kale lowered his hands, his chest heaving with exertion. Selene's light faded, and she sank to her knees, exhausted but triumphant. Kale rushed to her side, lifting her gently. "You did it," he whispered. "We did it, together." Selene smiled weakly, resting her head against his shoulder. "Yes, together." For the first time in years, the castle felt alive, not with fear, but with peace. The wards glowed softly, the stones seemed warmer, and the air was free of the oppressive darkness that had haunted the kingdom. Outside, the moon broke through the clouds, casting silver light across the towers and gardens. Kale led Selene to the balcony, the wind playing through her hair. He held her hands, gazing into her eyes. "The dress may have stayed here, but you will stay with me always," he said, his voice full of promise and warmth. Selene laughed softly, the tension and fear of the past days dissolving. "I will stay," she said, "if you promise to trust me as I trust you." Kale nodded. "I promise," he said. "No shadows, no past, no curse. Nothing will come between us again." For a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. The moonlight illuminated their faces, and the castle, once a place of fear and power, now felt like a home, a place where love and trust had conquered darkness. Yet even as they stood together, a faint rustle in the distant mountains reminded them that vigilance was always necessary. The curse was gone, but the world was full of mysteries yet to unfold. Kale tightened his hold on Selene's hand, silently vowing that no harm would ever touch her again. The castle's bells tolled in celebration, echoing across the kingdom. Servants and guards, once tense and fearful, now smiled and whispered of hope and renewal. The nobles would speak of the ball for years, not for its grandeur, but for the quiet bravery of the Alpha King and the Queen who had returned stronger than ever. Selene rested her head on Kale's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. In that moment, the weight of the past, the trials of the curse, and the pain of separation all melted away. What remained was trust, love, and a bond forged in fire and shadow. Kale kissed the top of her head gently, a silent vow of protection and devotion. "We have faced the darkness," he whispered, "and we have prevailed. Together we are unstoppable." Selene looked up, her eyes shining with emotion. "Together," she repeated. And in that word they sealed their story, not just as king and queen, but as equals bound by love, trust, and the trials they had overcome. Outside, the forest sighed in relief, the winds carrying the faint echoes of the curse being undone. The raven, now perched quietly in a distant tree, let out a soft, approving cry. The kingdom was safe for now, but Kale and Selene knew that their vigilance and their love would always be their greatest strength. The crimson dress shimmered in the moonlight, a symbol not just of beauty, but of endurance, courage, and the power of a bond unbroken by time, distance, or darkness. As they stood together on the balcony, hands intertwined, hearts beating in unison, the castle, once a place of shadow, glowed softly, a testament to love, redemption, and the triumph of light over darkness.